Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit. And yes, I'm probably going to screw up his name throughout the duration of this video. I've already shot this opening like 5 times because of botches like this. Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. So you have been warned. Anyway, I've always tried to avoid the hate bandwagon that follows M. Night around. Yeah, he's made some pretty fucking terrible movies, but he also made some pretty good ones early on, and I refuse to believe that a director can be that lucky that many times in a row, because people generally like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, and even Signs was well received when it first came out, but these days there seems to have been a backlash against it, so it's developed a more mixed reputation. The Village, when it first came out, actually had a mixed reaction, but these days it seems like people just don't like that movie anymore. I don't see any of the fans, or at least hear about them. I suspect that part of it is due to the backlash M. Night himself has received. It's caused viewers to reevaluate his movies. It's happened before. I'm sure it's going on with Josh Trank, I believe his name is, with the guy who did Chronicle and the Fantastic Four. With Michael Cimino, when Heaven's Gate was a huge disaster, it actually caused some people to question whether they really liked The Deer Hunter. It's weird how that kind of thing will happen. But as for me, I don't even remember most of these movies very well. I remember liking Signs, but at the same time, I was a lot younger back then, and when I see reviews of that movie, they're bringing up really good points against it, so maybe it won't hold up very well. The Village I still consider to be an interesting but mostly failed experiment, something I could easily forgive, because it is an intriguing idea. It's just not one that can really work within the context of film. I probably would have liked that a lot more in a novel format, or even as a play. As for the films that sort of ruined his career, I never liked Lady in the Water. The Happening, it's one of those weird movies where there is actually some legitimate good stuff there, but there's also a lot of really bad stuff, and some of that bad stuff is actually very funny. So I don't mind that movie, but yeah, I agree, it is pretty bad in retrospect. The Last Airbender, when I first reviewed that, I was actually a little soft, because this was during a period where I was watching way too many direct-to-DVD Steven Seagal flicks, and compared to those, The Last Airbender isn't really that bad, but I blame my standards there. I ended up watching the movie again when it came out on Netflix, and it is a pretty terrible movie. Sometimes I can be wrong. And then I saw After Earth, and I don't think I've ever reviewed that one. But After Earth is also pretty bad. The badness doesn't stand out quite as much as The Last Airbender's badness did, but it's also a lot more boring and pointless. There's nothing that I could even really laugh at about that movie. It's just a dull experience, and you should probably not watch it. And then there's Devil, which was sort of like The Happening in some ways. There was good and there was bad, and some of that bad was pretty funny. But it doesn't really count, since it's not technically an M. Night Shyamalan movie. But still, I always want to see somebody, have a good comeback, and The Visit looked like it could be that comeback, and it was. Unfortunately, I don't think The Visit's going to cause us to forget about M. Night's previous failures. It's not that good. The goodness of The Visit doesn't wash away the badness of After Earth or The Last Airbender or even Lady in the Water. But it's a good start. It does remind us that, yeah, M. Night Shyamalan does have a certain amount of talent and creativity. There are some pretty interesting ideas within this film, and it actually does some things very well. While at the same time, it doesn't do anything too poorly. For one, I actually really liked the characters in this movie. The kids were surprisingly endearing. At first, I was kind of taken aback because they seem way too smart for their age. They're using some fancy terminology, and in many ways, they just seem too mature. But then I started thinking about that, and I came to the conclusion that I would much rather have unbelievably mature kids over a much more realistic portrayal of the obnoxious, annoying kids that they would probably be. So I'm not going to complain about that. I liked how, the sister, she's not the aloof, bitchy character that we're used to from, older sister characterizations. And her younger brother isn't the annoying little brat that we expect him to be. Yeah, they have moments, but you believe those moments. Otherwise, I thought the kids were entertaining. They had a good dynamic together to where they bicker and banter, but they also genuinely care for each other. I thought the younger brother's rap stuff was really funny, even if they probably did that a bit too much. They didn't really need 3 whole raps from him. But still, it made me laugh. I thought it was a charming quirk to this character, which added to the movie. And the daughter's a filmmaker, and I think it's kind of funny how she seems to know more about camera placement and cinematography than most full-grown modern-day directors. But if you don't like found footage flicks because of the shaky camera work or disorienting editing, you should be pleased because The Visit is incredibly professionally shot. I could not tell that this was a found footage flick based on the trailers because the cinematography, it just kind of resembled a normal horror movie. Now, you could argue that that is a criticism because the whole purpose of the found footage subgenre, and yeah, I know that it's technically a mockumentary, but I consider that as being part of the found footage style, is that it's supposed to be authentic looking. It's supposed to be dirty and gritty, like, you've stumbled upon a snuff film of some sort. Or even a mockumentary is supposed to be convincing. Whereas The Visit is very cinematic. You always feel that these are movie characters and not real people. And just once again, the way that it's shot, the style, it doesn't really fit this mold. It just comes down to what you'd prefer the movie to be. If you just want it to be a normal horror comedy that just happens to be shot in a found footage kind of way, then you should be fine with it. And if you want like a true found footage movie that's much more grounded in reality, then you're going to be disappointed. I was perfectly fine with it, but I could see why somebody would reject The Visit for this reason. The grandparents, I thought they were pretty interesting because they'd alternate between sweet and cool and creepy and unsettling so swiftly that you don't even notice the transition at times. It's just perfectly... The switching of emotions is just so seamless and that it always makes them sort of off-putting even when they are being, very nice and pleasant. And the actors, all around are really, really good. And that's one thing that really surprised me because it seemed like M. Night forgot to direct his actors in his last few movies. I've always had a theory that the reason why M. Night fell so hard is because after The Village, his ego became so inflated that he thought he was the only reason his movies were working. And apparently he burned a lot of bridges behind the scenes, too, when it came to The Lady in the Water. And Lady in the Water was just his ego at its most self-destructive. And then after that, he just sold out and he completely left his element. The acting in both The Last Airbender and After Earth is so consistently bad that I usually blame the direction, because I always think that the actors aren't entirely sure what they're supposed to be responding to, and they're not being told, when to show more emotion or less emotion. That's one of the problems with the Star Wars prequels that I'm in the middle of reviewing. It's that they just all seem kind of lost and confused, like the director is more interested in the spectacle than them. And I think part of it is just M. Night had sold out at that point and just wasn't entirely sure how to direct this kind of movie. But now The Visit is back in his element, and he hopefully has been humbled, and he's listened to the criticisms, so he's obviously spent a lot more time with this cast, because the acting is, I thought, great. I thought everybody played their role incredibly well. In terms of like the comedy, because this is a horror comedy, and I thought that it was really funny. Yeah, sometimes it can get a little too self-aware and too cute, but usually when it wanted to make me laugh, I laughed. I thought there was a lot of funny lines, a lot of funny reactions, and I love the campiness to it all. It's not like it's going for a so bad it's good type of vibe. However, the jumps and the scary parts are often so over the top that, yeah, they're going to get a jolt out of you. They made my audience scream, that I watched this movie with, scream a few times. But at the same time, you're giggling at it at this. Totally screwed. I'm not even going to retake that. But you're giggling at the scares because they're also really funny. Now you could make a similar statement about The Happening, but the difference is I think The Happening wanted to be taken seriously and it was just laughed off the screen, so M. Night kind of backtracked and said, well, it was supposed to be so bad it's good. However, with The Visit, it's much more intentional. It's obviously intentional that you're supposed to be laughing and shrieking at the same time. Now, did I find this movie to be scary? Not really. There are some good jumps, there are some creepy moments, and actually when it gets to the third act, when the real scary stuff starts happening, the film actually does have a pretty unsettling mood. I'm not going to spoil what goes on, of course, but there's a pretty big twist, which in itself is simple, but I really liked the almost quiet execution of it, and there's this one image, which I'm just going to refer to as the hanging scene, that was very haunting, and that just set the tone for the rest of the movie, which is a much darker, where it becomes a lot darker. Suddenly, I felt the stakes, throughout the rest, the previous, throughout everything that had occurred up until then, I was into it, enough, but at the same time, I never really felt like these kids were going to die. And I'm not saying they do or they don't, but there does become a point where it's suddenly, I'm worried for them, and that is obviously a good thing. However, then it kind of screws up, because when the story is resolved, it starts getting incredibly goofy, and I can't spoil what happens. I'll just say refrigerator, but it's supposed to be really funny, and that just took me out of the movie because it was just, considering how dark it had become, it just contrasted too much with that sudden sight gag, and then it starts getting really sappy, and I was like, okay, this is a bit heavy-handed. But then it becomes silly once again for the very last shot. And it just, up until then, I thought the tone actually was fairly solid. Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of silly, but at the same time, it's a little creepy. And I thought M. Night did a good job at combining these wildly different genres together to create its own kind of tone. But for the finale, it just started jerking me around a bit too much. Still, I thought it was cool that these characters had like actual character arcs. There was depth to them, and it entertained me. It's a slow-paced movie, and not a whole lot happens in the first half. But I wasn't bored because, I found the characters and their situations compelling, and it was just a fun movie, even though I wouldn't say it's anything exceptional. So would I recommend it? Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I'd go to the theaters and see it if you're really not into this kind of movie. But I'd say it's at least worth a rental. And if it looks interesting to you in any way, yeah, definitely go to the theaters and check it out. Once again, it hasn't wiped out M. Night's history of, his previous, 4, 5? I haven't really counted, but his bad movies. But it's a good start. It gives me faith that maybe he can eventually repair his image. So I did do a written review of this, so please check that out. I've also done written reviews of The Transporter Refueled, Star Wars Episode 2, and Kung Fu Killer. My next one will be David Cronenberg's The Brood, probably followed by House of Traps, which is an old Kung Fu movie. So read all those. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I shall see you guys later. Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalan's M. Night Shyamalan blah 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 blah. Hello, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalindingus. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalan. Welcome to my review of M. Night Shyamalan. This is why critiquing the critics takes so long, people. Jesus Christ. Can't talk no good.